Because we refused to put on the air something that we knew and demonstrated to be false and misleading. That's what this is about. And because we put up a fight, because we stood up to this big corporation, and we stood up to your editors, and we stood up to your lawyers, and we said to you, look, there ought to be a principle higher than just making money.
And she wrote a letter back and said, you were right. That's exactly what it was. You stood up to us in this story, and that's why we're letting you go. Big mistake. Big mistake. That says retaliation. You can't retaliate against employees if they're standing up for something that they believe is illegal, that they don't want to participate in. So that gave us the whistleblower status that we needed in the state of Florida to file a whistleblower claim against our employer.
As far as 2 or 3 years later, we got to trial. 5 weeks of testimony led to a jury verdict of $425,000. In which the jury determined that the story they pressured us to broadcast, the story we resisted telling, was in fact false, distorted, or slanted.
Fox News appealed the verdict. 5 major news media corporations filed briefs with the court in support of Fox's appeal.
You may recall that Jane Acree, a former reporter here, sued Fox 13 in a whistleblower lawsuit, claiming she was fired for refusing to distort her report. The appeals court today threw that case out, saying Ms. Acree had no whistleblower claim against the station based on news distortion. Fox 13 Vice President and General Manager Bob Linger says the station has been completely vindicated by the ruling.
What Fox neglected to report is this. Jane sued Fox under Florida's whistleblower statute, which protects those who try to prevent others from breaking the law. But her appeal court judges found that falsifying news isn't actually against the law. So they denied Jane her whistleblower status, overturned the case, and withdrew her $425,000 award. Canada and Europe have upheld the ban on RBGH, yet it remains hidden in much of the milk supply of the United States.
So, you can look on your milk and you can see whether or not RGBH is in there. It's a pretty disgusting product. I guess that what it does is it actually inflates the cow's milk bags and it rubs across the ground and they get sores and then milk and blood gets into the milk. Or rather blood and pus gets into the milk, which is really disgusting. But you can see, you can actually look on milk cartons. Like Lanolix it has no RGBH in it. So you can see on your milk whether or not it has that product in it. It's become a marketing phenomenon, primarily because of stuff like this, and that is because documentarians and investigative journalists have discovered that in fact this chemical is harmful, and they have revealed that information in particular ways. But the thing about it is that you should know that 100% of television news and commercial statements, commercial stations, is funded by advertising. So you can't get everything that you need to know from commercial news, because it is 100% funded by advertising. The only way that you can truly be informed is by getting information from a variety of sources, from journals and newspapers and television programs that some people consider left, and that other ones that some people consider right, and as much in between as you possibly can if you are going to be truly informed. If you're not getting your information from a variety of news sources, you are opening yourself up to being propagandized to. The most important rule of every propagandist is to isolate your audience from competing sources of information. You know that you are being propagandized to when the place where you get your news and your public affairs information tells you to not go to other places and get information. The way that the media and information system works is all of the information sources that we get information from come from a particular point of view. None of them are truly objective. And because they come from a particular point of view, the only way to be fully informed is to get information from a variety of sources. This is only one illustration of how information comes to you from a particular point of view based upon the needs of an advertiser. for a particular station. But of course, Fox News and the 20 or 30 odd stations they own in America, not counting the major cable stations, is only one of several organizations that own a ton of news stations in America. And so if you go back to NPR, NPR does receive money from the federal government. But the law says that the federal government doesn't give NPR money. It matches the money that NPR collects. So if you've ever listened to NPR, you'll probably heard of the funding drives. For every dollar that NPR, actually I think it's for every $2 that NPR collects, the government gives them $1. And that $2 has to come by law from listeners, which means that 2/3 of the interest that NPR needs to appeal to are its listeners. Only 1/3 of the money it gets from government, and it only gets that money if it first gets money from listeners who can be satisfied or dissatisfied. Does NPR have a slant? Yes, it does. It does have a perspective. I'm not going to tell you that it doesn't. It does. But it is less influenced by outside sources than is commercial media. And commercial media has a slant too. Does the New York Times have a slant? Yes. Does the Wall Street Journal have a slant? Most definitely. If you're going to be truly informed, you would read both of them. And being informed is relatively important because major things are happening in this country right now. You know that Ron Paul, one of the Republican candidates, a few weeks ago, is advocating that we eliminate all student loans. All Pell Grants. Okay? That's a major decision that will affect you and your progeny. A major decision. And so you should be paying attention to what's going on. But that's only one of many small things that's going on right now. The super committee is going to cut something like $1.5 trillion from the budget. If they don't get anything done by later this month, we're going to lose something like 200,000 service members based upon the automatic cuts that are going to go through. You probably have relatives who work for the service who will either lose their job or be required to do more work for less pay because 200,000 people are going to be let go by the end of November if the super committee doesn't solve its problem. And that is either raise revenue or cut spending somewhere else. Now, even if they win, they're going to cut Medicaid. Now, if they cut Medicaid, that's going to roll down to the states. That means that South Dakota will experience a huge Medicaid cut. Now, what happens when South Dakota has a Medicaid cut? The state budget has less money, but they've got to pay those Medicaid obligations. And so they're going to have to pull money from other parts of the budget to take care of their Medicaid obligations or sacrifice that federal money. They're going to pull money from other parts of the federal government, which means one of two things, or one of the state government, one of two things. They're either going to cut public services again, education, that is increase your tuition, or they're going to increase your taxes. And that's guaranteed going to happen by next year. There are major things happening, but you can't properly select your political leaders unless you are fully informed, and you can only be fully informed by getting information from a lot of different sources. And that's my lesson.